want to welcome everybody back to Creative Thinkers. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and of course, we're sitting here because of COVID in our homes, and we have an absolutely special guest today. We have Carlos Gallinar. He is running for mayor of El Paso, but he also holds another very interesting position. He is a city planner. So, are you excited to be here today?
Hey, Miguel, totally excited. Thank you so much for the opportunity to visit with you and others this afternoon. Thank you so much.
So we're going to learn a little bit about you today. We're going to talk about, and let's start by, are you a native El Paso? Were you born here? Did you, are you come from Mexico? Give us a little bit about who you are as an individual.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, right? I was born and raised in El Paso. I am the proud son of Mexican immigrants. My mom is from Chihuahua, my dad from Zacatecas. And, you know, like many of our parents and grandparents, they came from the interior of Mexico in the 60s and 70s looking for work. And my parents are no exception, right? They came to Juarez, they met in Juarez, and in 1970, my parents, along with 4 of my 5 older brothers, so 4 of them were born in Juarez, came to El Paso, and we grew up in the Lower Valley. You know, great, beautiful family, very proud of my parents, very proud of my brothers. I have 5 older brothers, there's 6 of us total. I am the youngest. And yeah, Miguel, proud to be from El Paso, and I love this city, I love this community.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about is how you are trying to change the dynamic of the city. But let's continue on with learning a little bit about how you grew up. I'm really interested in learning a little bit about how the creative aspect of how you're running for office. So as a young child, did you have a lot of influences as far as creativity is concerned, or maybe a different way of thinking?
Yeah, you know, so let me say a little bit more about that. My mom, you know, again, I grew up in the Lower Valley. My mom was a housekeeper at a nursing home, and my dad was a janitor at a lumber yard, actually on the west side. So he'd have to commute all the way from the Lower Valley all the way down to Doniphan every morning. I would hear my dad at, you know, vaguely remember him around 5:30 in the morning, getting up, opening the bedroom door, getting ready his stuff, his lunch ready in the kitchen. But let me tell you something interesting about my dad. He was an artist, and maybe, you know, actually he's still an artist. He's still very much alive. But you know, he converted. You know, we grew up in the suburbs of the south of I-10, and Miguel, he converted into his studio. And so my dad.
What did you do?
Painting. He was a painter, and I keep saying was, but he is a painter. You know, he still dabbles in it. And so growing up, you know, my parents were working class, man. They worked. They se levantaban, trabajaban. They come home. My mom would fix dinner. My brothers, we all had to pitch in on. I like telling the story about, you know, one of the very memories that I remember about my mom also is that on Saturdays, you know, Saturdays were also very sacred because my brothers were out working or at school, and Saturdays sometimes we go over to Juarez to visit family, but when we wouldn't go to Juarez, my mom would finish breakfast and she'd, you know, take the last sip of her coffee and she would say, manos a la obra, you know, let's get to work. So, Carlos, you're going to, usted va a mapear. Joe, you're going to do the dishes, and Jaime, you're going to do the bathroom, and David, you're going to vacuum. That's how we grew up. But all along, that influence, that creativity that was influenced in me by my dad was still there. So, you know, we knew that there was a space in our house that was uniquely dedicated to my dad. He had magazines, he had books. You know, this is a gentleman that had an 8th grade education, you know, and
Right.
Very proud of my dad, but he was also and he still continues to be very much an intellectual, very much someone that wants to learn. You know, we're having, and we'll talk about it, about the campaign. You know, I love that I'm running, and I love that my dad and my family is so proud, right? He calls me every day, and mijo, I saw your sign up on Yarborough, or, you know, my friend called me and he saw an article about you in El Diario del Paso, and he's just so proud. And I am proud of them, and I am proud of who I am and where I came from. But yeah, listen, creativity runs in our family. I also, you know, when and I'm happy to talk about it, you know,
Absolutely.
when I graduated, so I went to Ballard High School,
Right.
Miguel, and class of 1993. And I'll talk a little bit about my working class. You know, so during the time that I was at Ballard High School in the 1990s, 5 of my brothers were working at Levi's on Pelicano, right? In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all that stopped in 1994 with NAFTA. But my brothers were contributing to the working class garment industry of this city. And the expectation, Miguel, was that Carlos Gallinar, when you graduate from Bel Air High School, there's a job waiting for you at Levi's.
Correct.
I wasn't the best student, you know, I really wasn't. I was actually graduated in the bottom 50th percentile of my class. But, you know, my mom pushed me along. I started at community college. Very proud to have gone to community college. I was there on the Pell Grant, you know, so when we talk about making sure that we're giving back to people, this country and this city have given me so much. But then I transferred to UTEP, and my undergraduate degree at UTEP was in English literature with a concentration in creative writing. And so,
so creativity once again, right?
yeah, man. I thought I'd go down to Guanajuato and write poetry and drink beer for the rest of my life, you know. But
life had a few different avenues for you to take.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And how privileged, right? For me to, after I've given you all this background about my working class parents and my working class upbringing, the privilege that a Carlos Gallinar would have, the notion that he'd be I'm the first in my family to graduate college.
Right.
But this privilege, man, that, you know, that here's Carlos Gallinar, you know, he's going to go write poetry, you know, who does that? But I love creative writing. I love poetry. You know, Ben Science is one of my mentors, the great author from El Paso, great friend, great mentor. Met him at UTEP.
Right.
And so I think all of this speaks, Miguel, to the wonderful spirit of our city, the wonderful spirit of El Paso, that we are creative, and the wonderful spirit of our people. We are creative. We are genius. We are makers. We do create things, right? Sometimes we're just not given the opportunities to do those things.
Yeah, you know what's sad is that while I was teaching, I'm still teaching, but one of the things that I really kind of understood is how people don't feel like they are creative. One of the things that I asked them right at the beginning of the semester is, how many individuals here are creative? And I would see one, maybe two hands out of 40 students. Yeah. So maybe 90, 95% are not creative. So I was like, you know, we got to change this. What's interesting is the fact that you can say that everybody is creative. I think that a lot of people, I think to a certain degree, are taught not to be creative. So it's a good thing for you running for mayor, an individual who is working for the city can have that type of mental kind of connection to creativity. So from college, again, I guess you decided not to end up being a poet in Mexico. When you came back, you started looking for work and whatnot. Did you end up working for the city immediately, or did you work somewhere else?
No, you know, so at UTEP, in my last semester, and to your point, man, you know, life takes us in different directions. And again, I've been very blessed and very lucky to have met great El Pasoans who opened a lot of doors for me. And I'm very lucky because of that. You know, so I met Ben Science. He was a great mentor. You know, Mary Caballero, Raymond Caballero, who at the time was 2 years later was going to run for mayor, or ran for mayor in 2000. But I met a great, beautiful gentleman who is himself an artist. His name is Nestor Valencia. And Nestor Valencia, for those of you who might know him, grew up in Isleta, also working class. But Nestor, you know, and I'll share a story about Nestor that just reminded me. But let me close this thought. Nestor was the planning director of El Paso, and about planning, which deals with creativity. But I met Nestor my last semester at UTEP, and
he was working there already.
He was working at the El Paso Community Foundation. He had already retired from the city of El Paso, but Nestor was a city planner. You know, most people don't know what city planning is, and I'll talk about it in just a second. But you know, Nestor was at the El Paso Community Foundation, and Nestor, one of the projects that he was starting to work on was the restoration of the Plaza Theater in downtown El Paso. And so, you know, Nestor, I met him. I was doing all this activist work as a UTEP student. I was marching to Cerro Blanca. Miguel organized a 3-day march to Cerro Blanca. I was and still continue to be involved in my community. But you know, Nestor was one of these people that people tell you, hey, you know what, Carlos, you definitely need to go meet Nestor Valencia. And Nestor changed my life. You know, he took me under his wing. He took an interest. When I graduated from UTEP in December of 1998, I had a couple of $1,000 left from my Pell Grant. And nice. I actually went to Zacatecas. I spent about 5 months with that money, visiting family where my dad was from, went to Mexico City, went to Guanajuato, came back in July of 1999, and Nestor hired me at the El Paso Community Foundation, and I was there for 5 years, and that's where I learned about urban planning. But let me finish the thought about Nestor. So here's this thing, and I hope people that are watching, and I know there's going to be quite a bit of people that know who Nestor Valencia is. But Nestor, Miguel, if you have, so first of all, listen again, great El Pasoan urban planner, has done so much for our community. But
Right.
if you and maybe I know you've been to the Plaza Theater.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
beautiful place.
Okay.
Ballets, symphonies, movie festivals, you name it. Yeah, absolutely.
So next time you go, and I know it might be a while because of COVID, but next time you go, you're going to see these really beautiful portraits of people, past mayors and the people who had a lot to do with the restoration of the Plaza Theater. Another wonderful woman, Janice Woods Window. So next time you go, you're going to see the portraits hanging up in the lobby area.
I've seen those. They're beautiful.
Those are Nestor Valencia's.
Really?
Yes, Nestor Valencia is so here's the thing, and talking about our people, man, of Mexican and Mexican Americans, conversation with Nestor one time, and I asked him, hey Nestor, had you and Miguel, listen, this is a gentleman that is accomplished, right? Has done so much for our community. And I asked him, I was a young man, and I really genuinely thought I was going to write poetry and be an artist. And
so at that point, you're still thinking this.
Yeah, of course, man. I know. I'm still thinking it now.
We never know where that road's going to take us, right?
It's plan B. If this campaign thing doesn't work out, maybe it's plan B or plan C. I don't know. But Miguel, as a young man searching for answers, and you look up to people like Nestor. I asked Nestor, if you weren't doing what you were doing, become this great urban planner, I said, what would you have done? And he really thoughtfully thought about this question. And I think it took him aback, maybe because he hadn't thought about it in a long time. But he said, Carlos, I would have become an artist. And not only that, but I would have become a great artist, the best in the world. And he's not exaggerating, only because you see that as a professional, what he had done for the city. And so you're like, man, he would have been a great artist. But Miguel, all of this to say, man, that again, many times, people that come from working class backgrounds, those doors sometimes aren't open for you, and maybe they're not open for you, but so much that you have, we got to work, we got to make a living, we got to earn a paycheck, we have to do what we need to do. There's a great saying, I believe it was John Adams who said, one of the founding fathers, who said, I studied politics and business so that my children could study art and philosophy.
Beautiful.
And that's what it's about.
That's true.
Right?
I think it's very, very true. And I think it's very interesting that a lot of people can't make that connection. But one thing that I'm seeing right now is the fact that you were telling me that Nestor had the ability to create paintings, and beautiful ones, because I've seen those. But yet he was creating his artwork through the city. So now let's move on to the planning thing.
Yeah.
What is it? How can we assimilate? Give us examples. And how is it an art form? Because it really is, I think.
That's right. So art, city planning is a very broad field, and I'm very proud to be a city planner. And again, growing up, I didn't think I was going to be a city planner. It happened, and most people that are city planners don't grow up as a kid. When they ask you, what are you going to be when you grow up? No one's going to tell you they're going to be a city planner. First of all, most people
nobody's heard of that, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Very few people have heard of it. So either you stumbled upon it, or you met a Nestor Valencia, or you took a geography class in undergraduate, and then you learn about this really beautiful profession. Miguel, it's the study of cities, and it's the study of cities in a way. When you look at, let's take El Paso, for instance, right? We live in this beautiful city, but there's many components to it. So when you think of what makes up a city, you have transportation systems, you have housing, you have businesses, you have parks, you have schools, you have people. And so city planning really takes a look at cities and how do you combine all of those things. And you have policy, you have government, you have mayors, you have city council, you have politics, you have people, neighborhood associations, you have low-income people, you have rich people, you have students, you have elderly, you have people with disabilities. So the whole spectrum of what makes up a city, you sort of bring it together and try to create a city that is functional. And so, we drive down Mesa, or we drive down Montana, or we drive down I-10, and most people don't realize that those things are planned, right? They don't just happen.
Right.
Nobody's, one day it wasn't like someone at the city, a planner said, hey, we're going to build a road down this piece of land. All of these things are planned, and sometimes they are planned good and well and great, and sometimes they're not, right? Again, you're thinking through many different layers of things that make up a city. And cities are messy, and cities are beautiful, and cities are great, and cities are wonderful, and it's where we live, right? It's the built environment and the mountains and people and jobs, or people without jobs. So it's taking all these things and trying to create the best, most efficient, prosperous, fair city for everyone. And that's really what city planning is. And so I've had a great 20 years doing it. It's something that I want to, my skill set that I would bring to the mayor's office. And then really quickly, I love, by the way, I love the conversation we're having.
Thank you. Likewise.
Let me say a little planning trivia about El Paso. So every major city in the United States, actually in the world, right? If you look at Paris and London and Mexico City,
Right.
and they're all planned. Planning used to be an art form. City planning actually came out of the fields of public health, first of all, and then architecture, right? The City
Right.
Beautiful movement. But El Paso in 1925, we call it the Kessler Plan. So there is when we get together, I'll share it with you. But there's a 1925 plan for El Paso built by George Kessler.
I
It's a
saw that, by the way.
Yes,
That's the that sits inside the main library in El Paso, correct?
it might be. There's many images that came out of that plan, but what I was going to say, Miguel, it is the second comprehensive plan in the country.
Wow.
And the first one, and ours was done. I'm going to forget the dates here a little bit, but I want to say that ours was completed in like November of 1925. One, which is Cincinnati, Ohio, was completed in February of 1925, also done by George Kessler. And so El Paso has a really beautiful, great history of urban planning. It's a great profession. It's a great art form. It looks at architecture and landscape, and again, people and transportation systems. And it's more important now in the 21st century about how we think about how cities should function for people.
Absolutely, since they're sprawling. I mean, they're growing
That's
so
right.
much. It's almost like we have to, even though they're huge, bring everybody back into our city center, which is one of the things that I think that you guys are focusing on. Can you expand on that a little bit? Can you tell
Yeah.
us, like, we are now currently doing these things, or these have been in the plan for a few years and we're kind of getting them together now? What can we expect?
Yeah, Miguel, great question. So, listen, man, I could talk about this forever.
I
But
know we
but
might
let
have to make a second show, okay?
yeah, right. Let me say something about just city planning for a minute. So, if you look at the year 1945, it is a pivotal year for cities in the United States, American cities, right? So, had you been
Why is
born,
that?
I'll share it with you. So, had you been born or living before 1945, you would have lived in you would have lived either in a downtown. So for us, it would have been like Segundo Barrio, which was very low income and continues to be. You would have lived in downtown El Paso. If you were rich, you would have lived in Manhattan Heights or Sunset Heights or Kern Place, or you would have lived in Isleta or Canutillo or Anthony in the rural areas, right? There were no suburbs. Like there was
Correct.
no Las Tierras or there was no Cimarron. And so what happened after 1945, to answer your question, is it was the end of World War II, and the United States became this is where the become the power, the superpower that it is today, I suppose, right? That's questionable, but anyhow, that soldiers started to come home, and you had two things that happened. You had the GI Bill, which allowed soldiers to purchase homes, and you had the creation of the interstate highway system. And so when you think of I-10, I-25, I-95, all this happened not too long ago, 50 years ago. And so you start to have now, there's two things that happen. You start to build roads out of the city center, out of the urban core, and you start to have people with mortgages, right? People that could start to afford houses. And let's keep in mind, it's white people, right? It's the white flight. White people took their money, their capital, and then moved to the suburbs. You had blacks and Latinos and people of color fill the voids in those urban cores. But all of this to say, Miguel, is that it started that you now have suburbs, right? And now we know
Right.
that as we continue to sprawl, to your point, it's becoming too expensive. It's becoming too It's unenvironmentally friendly. It's not good for our environment.
Right.
And so we need to, part of the campaign, or part of the process of what we're talking about, is that we need to start reinvesting in downtown El Paso and Segundo Barrio and the Chamizal and Sunset Heights and Manhattan Heights and all these sort of, and even the neighborhood where I grew up in the 1980s, right? Pima Village in the Mission Valley. There's a lot of neighborhoods, Miguel, that we have left behind, that we need to repopulate, that are losing population. So we want to, part of, if I become mayor, I want to put a big emphasis on these existing neighborhoods, neighborhoods where your parents and my parents became American citizens, where people achieved the American dream. But because we continue to sprawl and continue to grow to the outskirts, we have left behind. And so I want to put money back into streets, into sidewalks, into parks, because we can't continue to sprawl forever. And it's becoming too expensive. It's not good for our environment. It's unhealthy. And so part of our focus as a part of this campaign is to repopulate, revitalize some of these existing neighborhoods that, by the way, have some of the most beautiful homes, right?
Yes,
talking about architecture and talking about designs, Manhattan Heights, Sunset Heights, where I live. Every house is different. Every house looks different. Every house is unique, because there used to be some emphasis. And again, because you were wealthy at the time and you could afford it, there was a different emphasis to each and every different home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I do see a lot of change happening downtown. Specifically, I see the baseball stadium that came up, I don't know, 5 years ago now? It's been a while.
Yeah, a little bit.
More or less.
Yeah.
The plaza downtown,
That's
not
correct.
the Plaza Theater, but the plaza itself.
Yeah.
Beautiful addition. What kinds of things are we moving towards in the downtown area, as far as you mentioned the streets, you mentioned all of these other little things. Is there a major project that may be coming up here in the city soon?
Well, to answer your question, no.
Maybe development or ideas or concepts?
Well, there are, it's an interesting question, right? I think, part of the reason that I'm running, Miguel, is because, and I don't, I want to focus on your question, but one of the reasons that I'm running is because, in 2012, the former mayor, who is now running again, and this current mayor, the former mayor had the opportunity to build a multi-purpose cultural center and a children's museum and a Mexican American cultural center. So had all those things been built in downtown El Paso would have looked totally different today. Right. We now know that those things aren't being built, and so the short answer to your question is no. There aren't many projects in the pipeline. Let's give credit to this administration. They did break ground on the Children's Museum a couple of weeks ago, so I'm excited about that. But no, we need more projects downtown. So, I am one of the few candidates, or the only candidate that has a robust downtown strategy. So downtowns, when you talk about cities, downtowns are like the living rooms of cities, right? It is what we present to the world. As we have people come and visit El Paso, or when you travel, or when any one of us travel, right? One of the very first things that we go to, or places that we go to, are downtowns. And so on our downtown, to your point, Miguel, there have been some, let's be fair, right? There have been some projects that have been created, but not enough. And so what I would like to focus on, first and foremost, is, you talked about San Jacinto Plaza, which I think is a beautiful space. We need a larger urban park. Think of Central Park in Manhattan, right? So I would love to build a large urban park downtown. That's number one. Number two, we have some of the most beautiful historic buildings anywhere in the Southwest, but they're still underutilized, right? They're still vacant. The lights aren't turned on. And so I want to incubate small businesses into some of these buildings, have the property owner, through incentives, through tax breaks, have the property owner fix up their building, and then, hey, Miguel, who's an artist, comes into the first floor and opens up a gallery, or a coffee shop, or a bookstore, or a retail store, right? So we need to create more retail spaces in some of these beautiful buildings. That's number two. We need more housing. Again, if we're gonna stop sprawling and say Carlos Gallinar is saying we're not gonna build as many homes on the fringes of the city, where do you want those people to go, Carlos? I want people to have opportunities, especially young professionals, and working class people, to have good housing choices downtown. And so, let's build some more housing. Let's set a goal of however many housing units we think we could build over the next several years, and meet that goal and work towards that goal. So more housing, more retail, a park. We need a movie theater. We need a grocery store. We need to, the city has an arts walk. Let's revitalize that arts walk. Let's have more people visit and spending money downtown.
I think that's really exciting that you are bringing that kind of dynamic to the city. I think it would be great to see those changes because we absolutely need it, I think, as a community. I think it's like we do get a lot of pushback a lot of times. I see it in the news all the time. But I think that we are kind of right at the cusp of trying to get to that one place that we really want to be in. So hopefully we do end up getting all these things that we're wanting to create downtown El Paso. So it'd be really cool. If people want to get a hold of you, do you have a page, a web page, a website, an Instagram or something like that where people can actually go and make some contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you I'm gonna give you two things. One, I always share my cell phone with people. I don't, 915-346-6586. I think that as mayor, you should be as accessible to people as you possibly can. I don't, I'm sharing it, Miguel, and you're what is he doing? I've shared it with people all the time. People, even voters that I talked to 6 months ago are calling me recently. Hey, Carlos, I voted for you. People should have access to the mayors, right? So we're going to have an open door policy. That's my cell phone. I'm not going to change it. If elected to office, people could reach me through my cell phone. So that's number one. And then our website is going to be carlosformayor.com. And we have all sorts of plans and ideas and initiatives. And so that's one way that people could find us. And then it's going to connect you to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And so, yeah, welcome any feedback, any ideas, any suggestions, any criticisms that people may have of our campaign or when elected office. I am about meeting with people, Miguel. I am about wanting to connect with people, something that we haven't had at the city government in a long time. And so I hope that people will take me up on that and that they text me or call me or visit our webpage and reach out to us.
Well, I'm sure that they will. Yeah. I wanted to thank you for being our guest. I didn't want to take too much of your time.
No problem.
But again, I wanted to thank you. It was really exciting to talk to you and learn a little bit more about what you do and who you are and what you're running for and what you stand for specifically. So I wanted to thank all the guests for joining us today. Again, we're sitting at our homes because of this COVID pandemic right now. So we will try to get back into the studio as soon as possible. But again, we wanted to thank Carlos for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. Really, really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.